Welcome to the Webinar Talk Show. I'm Liz Green.
And I'm Tom Singer. Eliz and I put together the Webinar Talk Show as a way to show everybody that webinars don't have to be boring, they don't have to be long, and it's not just a talking head over PowerPoint. We take really smart people and take them through a series of interview questions so that we can go deeper and learn all the great content that they have to share.
And one of the things that we have had to learn to do over time is to sort of roll with technical difficulties. Currently, my computer is rebooting. It's been rebooting for a while. And in fact, probably at some point during this podcast or this broadcast, you'll hear the little Apple ding. Let's all celebrate that it actually came up. But right now I'm on my iPad and we're making it work. I
was going to say, we also had the problem that Facebook Live decided to be a little quippy today. And you know what? This is what you do when you're a professional. The show must go on.
Ta-da! One of the things that I appreciate so much about our guest today, Lisa Haen. Hi, Lisa. One of the things that I appreciate most about her is when I was working on my book and working on the part about the stress caused by uncertainty, Lisa was my go-to person to talk about that. Because of her background in creating safety culture in organizations, she was able to help me put together a way of identifying what the things we personally control and use that to reduce our stress. Lisa, tell us a little bit about your background and how that led you to really work with companies on having agile corporate culture.
Great. Thanks, Tom and Liz, for this opportunity. It's good to be here. So my name is Lisa Haen. I operate a consultant company called Culture Inside Out, where we believe what happens on the inside shows up to the world on the outside. It matters how we show up. And if we're not intentional and consistent, we're missing out. So I took my background in culture development in the safety space into more of a corporate drive because I found the need that there was opportunities that were missed out and leaders were leaving things on the table in terms of culture and developing their teams. So that kind of brought me to where I am today.
What kind of things are leaders leaving on the table?
Well, when we think about opportunity, there's so much chaos going on in the world and what I call the 70-30 rule. So on March 13th, we got a huge world reset, right? Everybody kind of stopped in their tracks and we had to reassess where we were going and what we were doing. And there was 70% of that mindset was, holy crap, what do we do now? And 30% of it was, well, you know, as REM would say, it's the end of the world as we know it, not the end of the world. So 30% it was okay, rational, 70% was oh crap. And when we think about leaving things on the table, that 70-30 shift needed to happen. And most of us made that happen the last couple of weeks where, you know, things are opening up and, you know, businesses are coming back. Things are kind of rolling forward. We're not quite there yet. But when we have that 70% oh crap feeling, we aren't thinking about the opportunities. We're not looking at the focuses. We're not concentrating on what really matters. We're more absorbed in our heads. So when we think about the culture of the organizations that we work for or with or own, we want to make sure we have a clear view to that opportunity. So when we shift, that agility shifts to the 70% opportunity and evolution, and 30% it becomes systematic. And we'll talk about the systematic later.
That's really interesting. And I know talking to lots of people, both on this show, as well as some of the programs that we're doing, a lot of us have been sitting in that 70% oh crap.
Yes.
What do you think? Can you give us a couple little tidbits about getting ourselves out of that oh crap moment?
Yes. So when we think about our mindset, we have so much going on. And I mean, we are nucleus families right now more than ever before. And there's so much going on. I call it the get him a grapefruit and keep him busy with my midnight muffins. So
Yeah.
so things that are distracting, we have to find a way to weed those out. So again, we can get back to what we need to focus on, what's most important. Give him a grapefruit. I have a husband who needs dinners and lunches, and it's caught up in the work week because I used to be gone and I did that, and now I'm home and do that. And when I give him his dessert, I give him a grapefruit because you have to actually dig out the sections in the grapefruit, and that allows me to get some time to do the things that I need to do. So those distractions and eliminating the stuff that really clouds your view. That's the first thing. The second thing is to really listen to your inner voice, listen to the things that are going on inside of your organization. Try to listen, look, and learn. And that will tell you a lot about how you can reset your focus and change that narrative that we're all kind of caught up in right now.
So Lisa, I hear a lot of people say, you've got to step back and listen. But how does someone really do that? Let's dive a little deeper into that. What does that mean?
Sure. So when you're listening empathically, so when you're not listening to respond, when you're listening to hear, to pick up those things that are going to benefit you. One of the things that I like to do when I talk to people on the phone, I make 3 calls a day, sometimes 5, depending upon my day, but I make 3 calls to people, and sometimes I get them, sometimes I don't. When I get them on the phone, what I do is I try to listen very intently about what they're not saying and about what they are saying. So we can then flush out the things that we need to pull from it. Whereas before I would listen and I would look to respond, and I would, want to solve problems. We're not in the solving problems mode right now. Yes, there are problems to be solved, but I think we need to listen more about what we need as individuals, what organizations need, and what the world needs. We're all in a reset.
Absolutely. And even before this, you had identified some things that were keeping companies, or because of their culture, from being as successful as they can. You developed some metrics around that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, culture metrics is all about where we are from a systematic perspective. So the systems approach to culture development is like the foundation. It's a framework that allows us to intentionally evolve into tomorrow's market. And it supports the essential infrastructures that organizations need to move that platform forward. So the culture metrics talks about, where we are, where we're at. We're in a position where we look at the things and we control the things that we know. So when we practice the things that are in the system, the culture agility system, we get to find out where we're at in the end, and we need to, use it like a GPS. So those are the things that the metrics tells us. It serves as a GPS to navigate where we're going.
What are some of those areas, though, that the GPS tells us we need to navigate that are common mistakes companies make when it comes to culture?
Leadership impact is the first one. So when we think about our leaders,
she didn't even need to think about that one.
No, she didn't. It's like right there.
No, well, the 2 big ones are team leadership impact and team alliance. Obviously, we've got a lot of disjointed teams. We've got a lot of chaos in our leadership structure, and what we find is that impact is really essential to how the team feels. So if you're a leader and you're freaking out, and I equate it sometimes to a mother who has to share things with their children, you share it in age appropriate ways, and you share it in a calmness that's going to lend itself to that calm recipient. And when we have leaders and their impact is chaotic and uncertain, we have workforce disjointed and vulnerability gaps. So one of the things that I tell my leaders is that when you check in with your employees every day, if you can, at least once a week, do that active feedback. Be flexible. That's the other thing that I used to manage a team that worked with 82 municipals in the state of Wisconsin. And I always told my employees, I pay you for the work, not the time. So I had to be very flexible with the schedule because they were remote. I worked with remote employees before remote employees was a cool thing. But what I told them is that that flexibility renders itself to that creative opportunity, to making sure that they got the work done without that pressure of 9 to 5. The other thing is focus. We need to really focus on what matters. The leaders need to take a look at where are the important things, what can we control, what do we need to let go, and what can be put on the back burner. So I think we have to be hypersensitive to that focus as well.
And that's one of the, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that, you made the comment that you were working with remote employees before remote employees were cool. We're obviously in this world where everyone's employees are currently remote employees for the most part.
Right.
However, that really has an impact on company culture because there are things that people are used to happening. I mean, there's the person who always takes that one parking spot. There's the person who always says things behind your back after the meeting. What a good and bad culturally. But now we're not together, so things are different. How is this impacting corporate culture?
Well, because we're not together, we're not having that community. And that community is a really important factor in the development of whatever we're doing, whether we're on a team or we're engaged in the cube farm, I call it. So, you get people stopping by your cubicle or stopping by your office. You don't get that interaction before. And I think, Tom, you're focusing on social tightening versus social distancing. And I think when we look at that lack of contact, lack of connection, it's really important to be very aware of that. And one of the things that helps is to celebrate the wins. So if you've got some wins on the table, celebrate them. Hold a virtual office party. I mean, you can get very creative with that connection. But the fact of the matter is we can't touch, we can't be within 6 feet. So we have to find other creative ways to do that, and celebrating those wins and staying connected virtually or finding ways to connect other ways. I know that there's some teachers who did drive-bys to their students. So they would be at the driveway. They would have little goodie bags for the children, and so thinking on that on a corporate level, if it's possible, make those connections the best way that you can, because those are really important in today's world.
The other thing I wanted to touch on that you said was figuring out what you can control and what you can't. And I know from our discussion in preparing my book, we spend an awful lot of time focused on the stuff we can't control. Mm-hmm. How do you advise people and companies to shift that focus? Because you said that focus is what matters.
Focus is very important, yeah. Because again, what happens on the inside shows up to the world on the outside. So if you're not intentional, then you lose sight of what's going on in your head, in your home, and in your workplace. So when we think about what we can control, what we can't control, it's important just to take a step back and to say, does this matter today? Mm-hmm. Is it important now? And what is the outcome that I'm trying to achieve? I had an experience with a dog that involved thunderstorms. She can control the thunder and the lightning, and it freaks her out. When I have conversations with my daughter, I often frame it where what is the worst case outcome? Mm-hmm. So you get that off the table. And then you focus on, is that something I can control or not control? And I think just having that conversation in your head, going through that motion is this something I can do something about, or is it something I have to let go? I think that's the most beneficial way to deal with those things that are really holding you up.
Well, and you said something that really resonated with me. You said what happens on the inside is what happens on the outside. And of course, your company is called Culture Inside Out. So let's dive into this inside things that are happening. We talk about, can you control that? But in reality, some of us just react. Yes. How do we set ourselves up not to be so reactionary?
Well, that's a tough one, because I think we're creatures of habit, right? We're used to responding, especially folks that are problem solvers. We want to dig in and we want to get to the bottom of it. When we think about reacting versus responding, setting up those frameworks in your mind, thinking about things from a perspective of how do I frame this for the next level or the next step to get to that result. What happens on the inside is a direct reflection of the things that are going on outside. So if you're internally having that dialogue where you're chaotic and the sky is falling, and if you hear the REM song, it's the end of the world as we know it, and you hear it as it's the end of the world, the zombies are coming, then internally you've got that chaos. It's going to show up on the outside. You're going to be, upset with your coworkers. You're going to be frustrated with the computer issues. You're going to have less patience, less tolerance, less kindness, and you're going to be shut down and stressful. So the ways that we can do that is try to change that narrative internally. That when we have something, we need to step back from it. When we have something happen, step back from it. Take a minute. Take a minute. We've got all the time in the world for those improvements now. So take a step back and reassess, and that's the best way to do it. Or at least that's what I found.
I like that. The other thing that I think is important is not only figuring out what we can't control, but really making the effort of figuring out what we can. Because when we're in that sky is falling, everything's terrible sort of spiral of despair, it's hard to see the opportunities. Mm-hmm. What tools do you have to help companies see the opportunities?
So when you're faced with a challenge, you
mm-hmm.
want to make sure that you take a look at the whole picture, not just your window. So for instance, there's a lot of companies now who are shifting to making masks or making gowns mm-hmm. or making sanitizers. Big companies, we saw this back in the World War II era where we had companies shift, Rosie the Riveter and
right.
new and inventive ways to doing it. So the tools that really help when you're faced with that chaos is getting all the clutter out of the way. Because if you have too many things that you're worried about, that you're focusing on, that don't matter, all that stuff is cluttering your vision, you'll have a hard time seeing what your needs are. And then again, just listening to what the world is telling you in terms of the need. So find your gifts, express those gifts, and then look at it from a holistic perspective. How can I help the whole picture by doing the things that I'm doing?
That's really smart, and maybe why everybody's cleaning out their garage.
Yes. You should have seen the curbside a couple days ago. All of my neighbors have done the purge. It's obvious. I'm probably the only one that didn't have junk on the side of the curb. But yeah, getting the clutter out of the way, I think, is the best tool that I've shared. That clients really are receptive to, that they really have to do an inventory, and then you'll see things. You'll see how you can help making masks, or doing the deliveries, or finding new ways, finding new opportunities to serve and to grow whatever you're trying to grow in your business.
So Lisa, if someone's listening to this and they're a manager and they have either a company or a team, and this matters to them, this whole idea of what you're talking about really resonates, can you give a couple of little pieces of advice that they could implement today to sort of help their team through all this?
Yes. So providing support is the biggest thing that a leader can do right now for their team. They need to really know who their team is in terms of internally, how they respond, how they want to be communicated to. So really invest the time, if you don't already know, invest the time in understanding what your teams need. And then again, listening to what they have to say, listening to their feedback, listening to the concerns. Being flexible, making sure that when you have those conversations, make a cheat sheet, feedback, flexibility, focus, make sure that you're hitting those points, because I think, how we conduct business under the scrutiny of COVID-19 will reflect our position when we come out of this. And when we use the tools of feedback, flexibility, and focus, celebrate the wins, and if we really listen, we'll come around in a much more healthy place when we get back to business as we will know it. It won't be normal, but it'll be something that we'll create a new normal.
Absolutely. I really like what you said just there in terms of the things that we can do right now is have real conversations with people as opposed to just saying, oh, how you doing? But have a productive conversation, and that feedback, flexibility, focus is a nice structure to have those conversations. So thanks.
You're welcome.
That's a great call to action for today.
Thank you.
So if somebody is listening to this and they think we've got to work on our culture inside out, how do people find you?
Well, they can go to cultureinside-out.com. We've got a whole list of things. Yeah, surprise.
So clever.
Whole list of things to look at there. I've got some tools. I've got the metrics survey that you can take to figure out where you're at in terms of your culture development. Culture agility is the model that was created over the last 2 or 3 years. I've actually been working within the framework for about 10 years now, but it's really a guide for that transformation. Because we're all in it. We're all in this transformation period. So if you need some help, head over to Culture Inside Out and we'll hook you up.
It's a very non-floofy approach to corporate culture. Indeed.
I'm non-foofy. Yeah, I believe that it's that intentional. You know, it's being intentional. It's we don't have time for fluff. I mean, when we think about where we've gone in the last 100 years, there was that before March 13th, there was that saying that, you know, in the last 100 years, we've made progress, and we've made more progress in the last 20 years than we did in the previous 100 years. Well, we've made more progress as a culture society and in business in the last 8 weeks. So it's that whole framing. And just a side note, culture development, it has always been referred to more of a soft skill, but it's been the hardest one to rally around. And people always thought it takes a very long time to change culture. And it really does take time. I'm not diminishing that, but we've seen shifts in how businesses operate and their culture structure in the last 8 weeks. And it's amazing. It reminds me of, I have a friend who she does the same type of business that I'm in with the culture space. And she's got a video where there's a guy in a crowd. They're at a concert, it's an outdoor concert, and he's dancing pretty wildly. I thought at first he was on drugs. He was just dancing crazy wild. And he just was doing that. And then all of a sudden, one other person stepped in and started dancing. And then before you know it, in about 3 minutes, there was a whole group of people dancing like him. So that's kind of a symbol of that culture shift of it used to take a lot of effort, a lot of sequential processes to change where we're at. And now we see manufacturers shift on a dime in terms of how they've made, gone from car parts to making masks, and their culture shift had to go with them. You know, their employees had to show up to work. They had to put in the work and trust their employer to protect them. So that's been an important key in it as well. Confiding that trust and that confidence in your leadership goes a long way in culture development.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us here on the Webinar Talk Show. I think you shared a lot of points that are going to make people go, and think, because I think more culture shift is ahead for companies. I think as we work through this and as we get back to work, I think that there's going to be a lot more shift. So I think that a lot of people should be looking up Lisa Haen and Culture Inside Out.
Thanks. Appreciate the opportunity.
And we're going to bring you more brilliant people like Lisa, although it's going to be a little hard to beat Lisa, but we're going to keep trying. We'll see you tomorrow for the next episode of the Webinar Talk Show. You can find us at webinartalkshow.com or like us on Facebook at Webinar Talk Show.
And if you have some sort of a virtual event and you think you need more than a talking head over PowerPoint, talk to Eliz and I, and we can help you arrange how to bring in-depth interviews and make your education more engaging.
Absolutely. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.